Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Cedarburg School Board. Today is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. This is a regular meeting of the Cedarburg School Board, and as a public meeting, prior notices have been placed in the district, and additional copies were forwarded to the News Graphic and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. First order of business, our recognitions. Mr. Kennedy.
The proclamations?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, the state of Wisconsin declared the following proclamation that the American Education Week is November 16th through 20th, 2020. That is it.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, Mr. Bugnacki.
Thank you. This evening, for approval through the consent agenda process, I'm asking that the minutes from the October 28th school board meeting be approved, and the approval of the financial information, which includes the summary of accounts, check register, check detail, and credit card transactions, as well as the personnel report. Who I believe Conrad's going to give an update, who is virtual. Conrad?
This evening, we only have two professional staff changes. David and Kathy Pollock, science teachers at the high school, have retired, and so we ask that the board approve that.
So moved, Kennedy.
Second, Cox.
Motion and a second. Roll call. All those in favor, Kennedy.
Aye.
Hadberg.
Aye.
Cox.
Aye.
Reimer is an aye. Thank you. Moving on, superintendent's notes. Mr. Bugnacki.
Thank you. We have two items under the superintendent's notes this evening. The first one is our regular building project update, and Ross Egert is here from C.G. Schmidt, who will provide that update. Evening, Ross.
Good evening, everybody. So, yes, a little bit about our construction project. As always, the three major themes of the referendum are creation of learning spaces, capacity, safety, and security. Overall schedule, we are approaching the end of our phase 2 here at the high school, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but we are preparing for that transition of office and staff moving into those new renovated spaces. We've had several meetings, including one today, to talk about the details of that activity, and it's been going well. So a little bit about phase 2 here at the high school. Again, we're approaching the final few weeks of that construction schedule, and you see these spaces are really starting to take shape, including at the on the exterior of the building. You see in the two middle images, the new paving, the site concrete and paving is done, and the building addition, the new entryway and canopy is really starting to take shape. On the inside, we're rolling through finishes. Carpeting has started this week, and we're anticipating delivery of furniture and placement of furniture on the 10th of December. So with that, we'll move into the budget portion of the presentation. And again, similar to last month's report, we have 3 columns now. The original values that were presented in that first update that we did back in November of last year, the previous update in the center column, and then in the last column, the current numbers. So what we're looking for and what I want to touch base on are those items that have changed since the previous update. And those are those items that are highlighted in yellow. So you see on the first couple of pages here, and most of the categories, we haven't had any changes since last month. On page 3, there's been a few additional costs on the low voltage side. These are items that would really be classified as safety and security, some cameras and well, an additional, education-wise, additional data drops to the CNC equipment in the metals and woods lab. That's one of those line items as well. On the next page, we also had some additional costs. Oops. Back up one. We also had a few additional costs on the district direct side, some costs associated with the phone systems and some integration that needed to happen during that phase 1 transition. Nothing on the soft cost side of things. So on the last page, our contingency report, you can see that we've drawn down a little bit more from where we were last month. We are bottom line at $1,113,000 of remaining unassigned revenue and contingency built into the numbers above. $1,032,000, I should say, last month we were at $1,113,000. So we pulled it down about $80,000 over the past month. And we've gone through the detail of those dollars with the B&G committee and of course at our Tuesday meetings that we have on a weekly basis. So any questions on any of that?
I have just a quick question. The schedule for this wrap-up at the last couple of weeks, is everything on schedule? And
Yeah, everything's really coming together well. There's been a real strong contingent from our subcontractor forces, and so it's been going along pretty well. We're maintaining the dates that we wanted to hit. So yeah, we'll be in good shape for that December transition.
thank you.
Are we able to utilize the time that the kids won't be in school as of the recent developments to help out? Should we be on time ultimately at the end, to Kevin's question?
We've looked at that, and we're going to do what we can. There's a few things that we're going to be able to utilize that time for. We've got to be a little careful because of the fact that there's still staff in the building. They're still using their classrooms, so services have to be up. We can't be making a lot of noise, so there are some restrictions associated with that as well. But yes, we are trying to take that advantage of that to as high degree as possible.
All right, anyone else?
All right.
All right, thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Ross.
Appreciate the update.
The second portion of the superintendent's notes is an update on our reentry plan. Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending, those of you that are here in person, and thank you to those who have tuned in from home. I can say we've hit a critical point in this COVID environment, which saddens many of us. The current conditions warrant a pivot from our in-person instruction to remote instruction. This is not an easy decision, nor is it preferred. Our teachers have been doing an extraordinary job providing in-person, blended, and all virtual instruction. Many would prefer, as would our students, to remain in person, but our conditions have changed and now we must pivot. There are a collection of factors that warranted the pivot. Throughout this year, our decisions were rooted in our three guiding principles: access, quality, and safety. Up until now, we have been able to confidently meet the expectations of each of these guiding principles. However, most recently, we have been challenged to meet the expectations of quality and safety, so thus the need to pivot to remote for a short period of time. Until recently, health officials have advised us to stay the course with our model. It was working well, all things considered. It became clear to many that students and staff appear to be safer in schools than in the community. We want to get back into person. It's best for all. However, the community spread has now impacted our district. We have stated since the beginning of the school year that we would make decisions using a holistic approach. We have been monitoring multiple data sources, and most importantly, we've been monitoring our ability to provide a quality experience in a safe environment. 3 primary areas: staff fill rate, capacity to safely operate, and contact trace, and overall absences have negatively impacted our daily operations. We have several principals here tonight to provide some firsthand testimonial on the challenges that led to our pivot. We also have online Director of Human Resources, Conrad Farner, and a few other administrators present to help us answer some questions and provide some insight into the challenges that led to the pivot to remote instruction. Here are the main areas that contributed to our pivot to remote instruction. We'll begin with staffing. From the onset of this conversation in this year, we have talked about all the different areas that were probably going to be a challenge to us, and we knew that staffing was going to be the greatest challenge. Entering this year, substitutes have always been a challenge, and given the economic conditions in the country, and certainly it demonstrated that this year it was clear to us that we could not secure subs at a usual rate. And so that has impacted our instructional program. So Conrad is going to provide some details on how staffing has impacted us in this environment. And as he provides some of the data, I think it's important to think about what are the things that we can do differently. Our goal is to pivot back into in-person, and as I had said in the letter that was sent out, we wanted to provide information to our parents on December 2nd, confirming the decision to come back on December 7th. And there's some key factors that we want to hone in on, and staffing is one of those items. So Conrad, if you can hear us, I'm going to let you take the lead and just talk a little bit about some of the staffing numbers that you've been tracking on.
Sure. It's really been a struggle from day one. We opened the school year with close to 10 vacancies that were not filled when you combine unfilled teaching and unfilled support staff positions. And for the first couple of weeks of school, we kind of hung around that number of somewhere between 9, 10, and 14, 15 unfilled positions. And since those first couple of weeks, it's just been getting steadily worse, culminating in the most recent week, where today actually was the worst day so far, where we had 28 unfilled staff absences. So that is the highest number we've ever had. In the last 5 days, we're actually almost all record highs, averaging 24 vacancies a day. So when you try to imagine running schools where you have that many teachers and support staff who are not available, it basically means everybody is forced to run around and try to just cover and have bodies in places, as opposed to making the commitment that we typically always have to high quality instructional learning opportunities. So the average, the 5 days up to the point of making the decision that we needed to pivot, we almost had 30% unfilled of our staff positions, which is a pretty high number. Our support staff, sadly, was at 91% unfilled, and that's been a problem from the beginning of the year. It's been a problem for districts all over southeast Wisconsin, probably all over the state, that there simply are not enough people out there who are willing to fill the paraprofessional positions and aid positions that we have not been able to fill. We've had basically about 7 positions, anywhere from 6 to 9, depending on the year, even as many as 10 support staff positions just unfilled. Like it's not a matter of somebody that's in the job and then they're absent. We literally are starting behind the 8 ball where we don't even have those positions, anybody in them. And so we're scrambling to get coverage with existing staff literally every single day of this school year. And then the last 5 days, actually 5 to 8 days, is when it's just completely taken off as far as the number of people. Just to get a feel, some general numbers, we've had 29 staff positive cases. So if you just, roughly figure that's going to be, give or take 8 days, 232 days where staff have been impacted by isolations. Another 66 staff have had to be quarantined. So again, if you ballpark, 10, 11 days, typically for a quarantine, you're looking at around 700 days have been impacted where staff are not able to be there. So that's almost a total of about 1,000 days that we've had staff impacted where they can't be on site. And we're doing everything we can to facilitate remote support, but that in and of itself is an unbelievable logistical nightmare when you think of all the people that have to be involved to get it set up so a teacher can stream into a classroom, and then somebody's in that classroom to supervise the students who are there, and then you have students coming and going every day. I'm not even getting into the student quarantines and positive cases. Other people will probably talk about that. But it all contributes to this general sense of we don't have enough bodies to safely man our buildings and to provide the type of learning experiences we expect to provide. So
Thank you.
there's other numbers, but I'll stop with that. I don't know how well this is coming over the phone.
You're coming through loud and clear. Thank you very much, Conrad. And so that's the number aspect, board members. And so when you think about us tracking on data and what kind of data do we need to make decisions in the future, those numbers are numbers that we're tracking on. So when our staff and students pivot to this remote environment, we're still going to be collecting data. So we'll still be collecting those who are positive, those who have symptoms, those who need to be quarantined or isolated. So we'll have data sources that we can continue to draw on, and that's what we've been drawing on. We do have a few principals here, Adam Kurth from the high school, Jane Hulk, the principal at Parkview, and Tony DeRosa, the principal at the middle school, who have firsthand testimonial on what it means to plug a vacancy in the morning when there's not a sub. And I don't know if, Jane, maybe you want to speak a little bit about that. I know one of our principals today was in the classroom teaching for probably the 4th or 5th time yet this year.
Sure, it's fun. I'll say that most of our days start with what we call the staff shuffle, and I walk in the door, and today was a good day because we only had 3 unfilled positions. But our staff, I can't say enough positive things about, and I know that's happening everywhere in the district. They are doing double duty. They're stepping into other environments. They're taking on additional roles. We have principals teaching. We have, unfortunately, in the elementary, most of our supporting teachers or specialists are now virtual teachers, which was a decision we made based on how many families we had choosing virtual instruction. So typically it would be myself, the school psychologist, the reading teachers, pulling the IMC people, a lot of those people to cover when we don't have substitutes, and we have fewer bodies to pull from. The other concern about when I'm pulling staff members, especially support staff that might be supporting in a particular area with a particular environment, is I'm putting them into additional environments, which is increasing their contact, and that's something that we've been concerned about. We're making it work, but it certainly is a daily challenge.
So board members, you can get the idea of the challenge, and when you think about sustainability in this model, it becomes a bit of a challenge. And when you think about capacity to fill these vacancies, that is just an added challenge. We do use non-certified staff at times to fill some of those vacancies, especially if a teacher is streaming into the classroom from home. But you can clearly see when you start playing this out over and over in the buildings, it becomes a question of quality, and it becomes a question of safety. I'll pause there on the staffing piece. We're going to walk through each of these areas because I think it's critical, because these are the areas that caused us to pivot. And I'll ask board members if you have any questions regarding staffing.
I mean, I think just a point to be made is you're saying the reading specialists, psychologists are being pulled in to kind of facilitate a class, right? So their specialization is not being utilized, essentially. So we're losing the support that we would need in reading. We're losing the support with psychologists. We're losing integral support that we need as part of the school to just make sure we're functioning at a basic level, is what I understand.
Correct, and some of that was on the front end, actually. We were shorter staffed than normal because of providing instruction in both environments. So like IMC directors are in classrooms, helping virtual classrooms. So yes, it pulls us away from what we would normally be doing. Principals trying to meet is a challenge that we're finding time for planning for virtual instruction or this remote upcoming couple of weeks that we have, just because who's available when, who's teaching class, who's supervising in the cafeteria, who's taking over those recess duties. it does pull us in a lot of different directions and does pull us away from our usual responsibilities.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing we might talk about, but I feel like there's a topic that comes up that with the support staff shortage and this shortage of having like hands on deck, that community members can be used, but I just want to clarify that that's not how that works. That we have specialists that are certified and there's requirements by the state in terms of certifications, so we can't, necessarily have parents come in as much as we'd love to have them come in. I just want to make sure we clarify that because I think there's still some miscommunication there.
Yeah, that's a good point of clarification. If you go on our website and go under Human Resources Department and list and click on employment opportunities, you can see all the positions that are posted. And we did post for classroom supervisors.
Yeah.
And the thinking is when a teacher is home who's able to teach, they're quarantined, and if they don't have to provide childcare for their own kids that are home, they could potentially stream instruction back into the classroom, and we could have a supervisor in the classroom.
Yep.
But so that is posted out there. I think there's been reference to volunteers, and we'd want those individuals to be hired because we want to do the background check. We want to do all those types of things. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
So let's move on to the next item, which is the sub shortage. And Conrad, I'm gonna ask you to speak on this again. And I will say, the board on the front end of this school year allowed us to hire additional subs, and we did hire one full-time sub for each of the buildings, and we have since posted for additional full-time subs. So we have been on the front end of this, but as Conrad had alluded to initially, that there is a sub shortage, and quite honestly, not all subs want to come out in this environment and sub. There's a question of safety, and they are thinking that maybe it's just not the safest environment. So we have heard and seen some of those behaviors. But Conrad, maybe you can talk a little bit about the postings that are out there and the sub shortage.
Yeah, it's really a statewide issue. Every other district that I've talked to and have connections with has indicated that they do not have enough substitutes. It's really not just a substitute shortage. As I mentioned earlier, there aren't enough people in the first place. So if you think about it, if we have 8 vacancies open for paraprofessionals, there's not going to be a big pool of people to be substitute paraprofessionals because we can't even fill the para positions that we have in the first place. So that right there speaks to the dilemma. From a teacher standpoint, Teachers on Call has made it very clear that a significant number of substitute teachers are not substituting right now. Many of them are retired teachers, and they just are not interested in coming out into the schools, given the positivity rate of the virus in the communities. And so it's really created that perfect storm where there simply are not enough viable bodies. We've done everything we can as far as advertising, increasing pay, recruiting people, calling for subs even when we don't, like we're calling a few days ahead of time, just anticipating what could happen on any given Friday, which typically tends to be our worst day. So we're doing everything we can using the staff that we have. It puts quite a strain on the staff as you can't just worry about doing your job because you're always knowing that you're about to get that call, you're about to get that email, you're going to get somebody coming out reaching to you to say, hey, we need you here. Can you take this? Can you do this? Can you work these extra hours here? Can you cover that classroom there? And it adds an unbelievable toll to people because they're not able to just focus on doing the job and doing the things they normally would do on that time because they're ending up covering in other situations.
Thanks, Conrad. So what we've done in district, when we have subs or a position that is available at another building, we shift them to other buildings. So we have those district-wide subs that have been moving through the buildings. So it's not so much building staff anymore as much as district staff. And so when we have resources at another building, we funnel them over to the other building. In fact, some of the district office administrative assistants have gone down and helped out in the offices. So we are using staff as creatively as we can to fill these vacancies. And I know, Adam, you've done some creative things up at the high school, and certainly at the high school, when you have those prep periods, you are able to draw upon teachers to teach and cover during the prep periods, and that certainly is a solution, but a sustainable solution, probably not. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, Adam.
Well, before Adam, the other point to make is that the number of cases that we are experiencing is what's driving the shortage, making it even worse. We literally had 5 teachers in the last 2 days who had a positive exposure in their family. So right there, now we need 5 more bodies to cover classes, and it's just, we can't keep up with that kind of positivity.
Thanks, Conrad.
Yeah, we do have the ability to use teachers. It's kind of a catch-22 when you do that, though. We're not only removing them from preparing for their instruction, but we're also exposing them to another classroom. So we're increasing the exposure of our staff with the opportunity for them to be quarantined for whatever reasons they may be exposed, and taking them away from their prep period. So we've tried to hedge against that as an opportunity. We've used everybody in our building to sub in the classroom, and that's just not providing high levels of instruction. It's removing opportunities from all over our building in terms of other resources and offerings that we offer our students. The IMC, we've had to remove from our security, our hallways, our supervision. We've had administrators in classrooms. We don't have enough bodies to maintain any levels of instruction the way our teachers typically do.
Yeah, so the standard that we hold ourselves to is a standard right now that we can't meet because of the capacity issue and our staff being stretched. And we understand the challenge. I'm bringing, all of you know this, board members. I think it's just important that we articulate this to you and to the public so everyone understands what caused us to pivot. And when I think about these, I think about solutions. Like, what are the solutions to these? And that's something we want to be focused on. And we continue to post and creatively post, and we're hiring as many staff as we can. I think what we're highlighting here is the fact that we have a number of staff members who are quarantined. Conrad had just said there are 5 staff members today that were exposed. That means they are quarantined. So what we're doing in this pivot to remote is actually an opportunity to reboot the system, if you will. There'll be enough time there for everyone to potentially take a pause. If they do the right thing and they isolate and they behave, we should see the number of quarantines come down, and we should see the number of positive cases come down when we come back. So there is this opportunity to reboot. I'm going to continue, board members, and go on to the next item, which is the contact tracing. And this is an item that all of us, unfortunately, have had experience in, some of us more than others. And Nicole Kofta's here, our district nurse. And Nicole has put in a tremendous amount of time to contact tracing, and there's a lot that goes into that. And it gets all the way down to the distance between the desks in a classroom and seating charts. And so it's not a quick process. For every positive case, it takes anywhere between 2 and 4 hours to work through the details of that and to conduct all the contact tracing. And the principals have been involved with it. Ted has been involved with it. And Nicole, maybe you can just highlight a bit of the most recent numbers that you have over the last few days. I know Ted and you were just having a conversation, and I think it's worth highlighting because it's a draw on your time and your energy. And I don't know that there's one evening that she's been out of here before 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And it not only goes late at night, it also goes over the weekend. And there's no control over when we get those positive cases. We can get a call at 4 o'clock and say we have 6 cases, and then we want to contact trace immediately because we do not want the kids to come into the school the next day. So again, trying to keep everyone safe, but there is a cost to doing that. Nicole, maybe you can share a little bit about the numbers.
So over the past 5 days, we've had 16 total cases of just students testing positive for COVID-19. And out of those 16 positive cases of COVID-19, we've had a total of 186 students that we've had to quarantine just over the past 5 days. Today alone, with a case at one of our buildings, we had to quarantine 37 students just in one building. The contact tracing, it's incredibly time-consuming. Multiple people help. The principals are contact tracing, the health room aides are contact tracing, I'm contact tracing, and we have a really good system but it's incredibly time-consuming because it's not just one case that gets reported. There's days that we get 5 cases reported. And so for every case that gets reported, we have to go through that student's schedule. We have to contact those parents and figure out if there's been contacts that have occurred outside of school that we need to quarantine for. Go through the schedule, go through the seating charts, check in with the teachers to see if there was any possible exposures other than where the students were sitting within the classroom. And that happens multiple times a day. Over the Halloween weekend, when we returned from that was probably our biggest influx of positive cases, where we've had 5 cases reported one day, 4 cases the next. And essentially that is our sole responsibility at that time. Everything else kind of comes to a halt, and you're focused on who are the children that are exposed, who are the students that need to get removed from the building, contacting those parents, answering their questions. Why does my child have to quarantine? It's a time-consuming process, and it happens again and again and again.
So board members, when we think about capacity, I asked Nicole, so what happens to the regular responsibilities that you have during the year? The training to teachers on EpiPens or diabetics or those types of things, and those things are getting pushed off because there is a need for us to respond immediately to these situations. It's still getting done, but it's not getting done in the timely way that we would like to. And there is an impact here when we think about the community. We have a lot of clubs that operate outside the school system. And so there isn't necessarily consistency in how the clubs are reporting their cases to the system, to our school system. So that creates some additional work on our part because each club handles it a bit differently. And so then we end up finding ourselves contact tracing with the club or for the club. And there's been some recent incidents that happened, and I know Tony's been deeply involved with that. And maybe, Tony, you want to speak to how that just impacted the middle school, the contact tracing. Because it takes your time away from the instructional leadership roles that he would have normally, and he's not able to do those, conduct those responsibilities.
Sure. Thank you, Todd. Good evening, school board. Certainly, there's a ton of different community activities and programs that our families take advantage of, and it's excellent opportunities for our students. But we are certainly seeing that not every outside of the district entity operates in the same fashion or in the fashion that the district operates. You know, we take great pride in every activity that we do choose to run if we feel it's safe enough. So whether it's clubs, activities, practices, you know, being able to contact trace, creating groups for different activities, and always being able to walk your steps back to contact trace for a positive case. What we're experiencing is outside entities not really operating to that same degree and oftentimes not communicating with us when there is a positive case. So pretty much every single time this has occurred, we find out from a parent who is doing the right thing, who is calling their child in, and lets us know what the situation was that occurred at an outside entity. And that's the first we usually hear about it. And so that starts a whole detective process of trying to figure out, okay, what was the activity, who was in charge of that activity, contact numbers, dates of attendance for that activity, all those pieces that we feel that the outside entity should be doing to the degree that we are. And so anything we can do to assist or help those outside entities, we'd certainly be willing to assist them in an effort to expedite the work that we have to go through when these situations occur.
So we think about solutions, and one of the solutions that's been discussed with the administrative team is sending out a letter just to these clubs and explaining our process and what would help us to help them and to help our instructional program. So that's one potential solution. The other things that we talked about with helping with the contact training is just more training within house, and I think we continue to do that. Greater use of technology. We're beginning to use technology a bit differently. Those of you who maybe had a quarantine recently may have received a digital call, an automated call that was sent out from the school system. And that's been done in place of the personal call, which would normally take, a countless amount of hours to do. And we continue to hire. If you look at our positions that are open, we continue to look for health room aides and additional support for Nicole. It's critical when you think of trying to keep and maintain a safe environment. Recently at Parkview, it's all the health room aides at Parkview are no longer available because they are quarantined. And so when you run into that situation, then that contact tracing falls on Jane or secretaries or Ted or Nicole, and then they're getting pulled away from other responsibilities they have. So you can see how very quickly there's this domino effect in the system. And I think we're doing our best, but it is a capacity issue and it's a sustainability issue. So when we talk about the need to pivot to remote, I think it's important to note that to reboot the system would allow our quarantines to come down, positive cases to come down, allow us to continue to work internally to strengthen our systems, because I don't see any numbers right now trending in our favor. Every indicator that we have in the district that we're tracking on is trending in the wrong direction. So I think the reboot, if you will, is coming at a good time. I'll pause there and see if board members have any questions either about the sub shortage or the contact tracing.
I just want to thank the staff for your diligent efforts in the contact tracing. I know that different counties across the state and agencies typically have a 24-hour period where they will get back to you. And I know when we find out, you guys drop the world and figure it out and get back to us immediately. To Todd's point, I've been on the phone with them and we're talking about cases coming in, and it's, he says, well, I'll find out in a little bit. Nicole's almost done, and I look at my clock and it's 8 o'clock. And that's happened a few times. I know there's other people involved, so it's a constant effort, and it's something you guys didn't sign up for, and I just really appreciate it.
Yep, that's a good point. Appreciate you making that. I did have just a generic question on contact tracing. If a parent calls and says, one of the parents had COVID, so they had their kids tested, and let's say one of the children has it, how many days back do you go in contact tracing? Like the previous day, 2 days, 3 days of school? Like what do you typically?
It all depends on the date the symptoms started. So it's part of the concern when sometimes we contact parents, because it might be a week later from their exposure date. But when you contact trace, you have to go from the date the symptoms started for the positive individual plus the 48 hours prior to symptom onset, because that's still considered a contagious period. So sometimes, we might not call a family until, let's say, November 18th, but we find out on November 11th is when their child was actually exposed to the positive individual because his symptoms started on the 13th. So we have to backtrack that amount of time.
Interesting. Thank you for explaining that.
I guess I would just like to maybe try to synthesize. This is a lot of information, and it's really great information, and I really appreciate everybody that has spoken coming here to explain their situation, because you guys are living it all the time, not just within the school hours, but I think you probably dream about these things. Unfortunately, I wish you better dreams. By switching to virtual, it seems like what I'm hearing is that we can assume that in this virtual time, part of this reboot is that our number of quarantine students will likely go down because they'll have less exposure with other students on a day-to-day basis if they're in their home. Is that sort of right? We think that would probably happen?
I think that's the theory behind this, is that that would happen. Other systems who have done, if you want to use the word reboot, which I used, they have seen their quarantines and cases cut in half.
Okay. Also, and I don't know if Conrad is still on the line, we're likely also to see our unfilled positions go down, because even staff that is quarantined would be they would be able to teach from their home if they're well enough to do so, without having to get another staff member in a classroom to physically sit with students in an in-person environment. That is also a positive.
Yeah,
yes?
that would be accurate, Sam, if the students are also virtual.
Right, if the
Yes,
students are also
correct.
virtual.
Yes. Yep.
Right, okay, and then so because we're not pulling teachers or other professionals away from their own duties, they would probably be better able to focus on their own instruction, which is, I think, something that Adam said, being able to focus on high-level instruction instead of just having to wonder which class they're gonna have to run to cover. Okay, and the same for administrators. They would be able to do their administrator duties without having to, okay. So I think all those are good things. All those are unquestionably good things. I wonder how we will know. I guess what I'm worried about is falling into the same trap once again, into the same pit of quicksand once we come back. And I think we need to, in making that decision and having these conversations about if December 7th is the right day, I think we need to keep all of those things in mind, and probably a lot of others too.
Yep, I agree, Sam. I think we're going to continue to gather the data and make an informed decision. And as I said from the onset, it's a holistic decision. There is not one data point that will tip us one way or the other. It's really looking at all those data points and understanding what they mean. And I'll show you some data in a moment, because a perfect example is West Lawn Elementary School. Their attendance absentee rate is fairly low. But what we're seeing at West Lawn is that there's teachers out, and that's one of the schools where the principal has to step in and teach. Yeah. So it's just not one data point like the student attendance at a building. It's multiple data points that we look at to make a determination. So we'll continue to monitor that. One item that I think is worth noting, and you touched on a little bit, is just about the quality of instruction. And on the flip side, just the quality of learning that's going on. What type of learning is occurring, especially when you have quarantines that are occurring and going in and out. And when you think about the contact tracing, when you're contact tracing, you're inevitably going to have to quarantine individuals and students. And I think it's something we'll discuss in just a few minutes, because I think students are impacted by that, because you can have almost a revolving door of kids coming in and out of the classroom. And that's very disruptive. And we'll touch on that under quarantine increases.
One other thing to add to the pause that it helps us with number-wise is we have almost 300 people quarantined right now. That quarantine period burns off during this time period. So to date, at least as of last month, we had very few people who were quarantined that ended up getting COVID. So those roughly 300 people, hopefully, knock on wood, they don't get COVID during that quarantine period. They're good to come back after this pause. So that would increase our numbers.
It should. Yes, it should, Kevin. The next item, we just wanted to, we're going to continue through the list of special services, and Ted Knowles here just to talk a little bit about that, because there are areas in our district that I think are challenged a bit more, and Ted oversees many of those areas.
Good evening, school board. Tonight I'm going to talk about special services, not in particular one program, but special services encompasses everything from special education, Section 504, EL, our tiered interventions for academics and behavior. And like all the other areas, these are areas that have been particularly hard hit in terms of coverage of students and staff. Just from the beginning of the school year, we have had 13 quarantines or isolations from our special education teachers, and 12 paraprofessionals have been either quarantined or isolated because of positivity from COVID. So, and often those positions go either unfilled or backfilled from other areas to cover students and their needs. So an area that we're continuing to monitor very closely is how we are, meeting the needs of those students who need extra support, whether that be behavior or academics, and supervision, because we not only want to give a good program, we need to keep, those students safe and moving forward. The special education program has also had 8 unfilled para positions that we brought to you before school started or at school started, and we continue to try and fill those. But again, backfilling with a variety of staff and switching around of different positions as well, all have created a very, challenging situation for our existing staff. One of the things that I think Mrs. Holt brought up was our students who receive tiered academic interventions. Many of our specialists now are teaching either virtually or covering in classrooms. So a lot of our students who need those specific reading and math interventions, often some of them are required to consider them later for special education and evaluation, aren't getting those as timely as they should be because we just don't have the staff to do those. And with Section 504, we're often moving quickly to make sure that those students who need different accommodations to provide access to the environment are getting those by making sure that our substitutes and our teachers who don't normally have those students understand those students and can provide those interventions. So it's always a lot to get done in a short period of time for these students, but we continue to work really hard. But it has been a significant impact to get these things taken care of.
Thanks, Ted. Any questions for Ted?
Thank you.
So Ted, how do you plan on providing support during this virtual period for the kids that have specials?
Sure. So we, case managers, special education teachers, specialists have been reaching out to parents to talk about how we're going to support their student virtually, potentially have some opportunity to come in, maybe to receive some special services occasionally during the day if they have a hard time benefiting from some virtual things. None of our students are going to be full-time in our buildings, but some may come in occasionally for some services, just at a very, intermittent kind of occasional type of thing. Mm-hmm. But every case manager has been reaching out to families to make sure those services continue during the switch to virtual.
So it's pretty dynamic based on the...
It's a very dynamic thing, and that's the toughest thing. Every one of these students has a specific, unique set of needs, and it's hard to give a general kind of just overview or, hey, we're going to do this one thing for this number of students. All these students have individual plans that need to be accommodated.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Some other areas, board members, I just want to touch on this slide that, again, factors that contributed to the pivot. The Washington Ozaki Public Health Department, we know they have seen and are seeing unprecedented numbers between the two counties. You can go on their dashboard and see that. And I'd like to say that the Washington Ozaki Public Health Department has been a great supporter and been a wonderful resource for us. And they have supported us in our model. Up until probably about a week and a half ago, they were saying, stay the course. Your numbers are actually okay in the system. It appears that the kids are safer in school than running around in the neighborhoods, and the staff is relatively safe. And so they knew that we had very little to no in school transmission. Most of the cases were coming from the community and coming into the system. So they were very supportive of our model. And it was probably within the last week and a half that they made the recommendation that we should pivot to a remote instruction, given the numbers that we're seeing in our district. So we have, from the onset of this conversation in late August, said that we would follow the recommendation from the health department when it comes to needing the pivot. We knew our mitigation measures were good and strong, and we were committed to the in-person model, and we have done extremely well. I think what's working against us is the numbers in the community. They're significant, and we knew they were going to seep into the system, and that's what we're seeing now. The last few items on the bottom of this slide, the COVID cases increasing. Just a couple data points that we've seen the highest number of positive cases in the district over the last 14 days. Cases have doubled in the last 2 weeks. So you can see that on our website, and the trend is not heading in the right direction. Quarantines increasing, it's at a significant level. The highest average number of quarantines in 5 days. An increasing number of students are being quarantined for the second and third time. And that's noteworthy, because I have had a conversation with a couple parents who were upset that their child is being quarantined for the second time. That's 28 days. A quarter in our district is 45 days. So half their time they've been quarantined. And they're kind of upset because it's not their doing, it's something else. It's something else. Someone else is not following the guidelines, and now they're paying the price. So the quarantines, when you start seeing the second round and third round of students being quarantined, that's a concern. And that's a significant point when it comes to just the delivery of instruction. And I just want to pause there, and maybe Adam or Jane can speak to this, because when you do have a door of revolving kids coming in and out, it really is disruptive to the instruction.
It's now impacting our classrooms. We At the high school, we were pretty happy with where we're at. If you had asked us a month ago, I think the majority of our staff felt they were fairly safe, relatively safe and functioning at a high level. When you have this number of cases and quarantines, it affects everything you're doing. Our staff, just to back up, our staff are working twice as hard in this environment. Everything they do has to be translated into 2 different platforms. And so if they work with manipulatives or if they have learning packets, those sort of things, they have to either make it digital for our virtual students, or they have to, we had a good system for our virtual students. For those of you who have high school students, we have go bags every other Monday. Our staff put together whatever materials our students need, send them home every other Monday. It was a very solid system that was working for our classes. When you have the sort of cases and quarantines that we have, it truly impacts your classroom. If I'm planning for 2 weeks of work with my virtual students and I walk in the next day and I have a dozen students quarantined who didn't pick up a go bag, now I have to find a way to get materials to them. Now I have to change my instruction. Now I have to adjust everything that I had already planned, group work planned, Google Hangouts that are pre-structured for the students you believe are going to be in your classroom or at home. A month ago, when we were seeing, a dozen quarantines a week, maybe, we were able to adjust to that. When you get up with 100 quarantines and every classroom is affected, our staff are having to really lower the quality of their instruction just to adjust to the students who don't have the materials, had to leave, didn't have the novel that they needed or that we were discussing the next day. So it's really impacted our instruction at this point. And our staff, like I said, are doing a tremendous job of adjusting and navigating that, but it does add an additional weight on our teachers to try to make that work.
When I think about that, Adam, I think about pacing, right? You have to adjust the pacing, and our teachers are perfectionists. They are professionals in the field and experts, and they want to provide the highest quality instruction to our kids, and they hold themselves to a high standard. And when they can't meet that, emotionally, that's hard on them. They begin to beat themselves up, and that's what we're dealing with, is just trying to keep their spirits high and boost them up and give them permission to adjust that pacing. But when I was listening to you, I was thinking pacing is what's impacted. Board members, any questions regarding the quarantines? So the next item is just the absentee rate. Again, this is on our dashboard, or actually it's on our internal dashboard. What's out in the public is our attendance for the month, but we're seeing the highest 5-day student absentee rate across the district. The district right now is at 20% and climbing. 2 schools, which would be the high school and Webster, above 25%, and one's above 15%. So our attendance rate is significantly increasing, and you'll see that on a couple of the following slides. So principals, thank you for being a part of this, and we may need you yet, but you can sit down. Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you as well. Now, board members, I just want to share with you some of the data. I'm not going to dive into this because you've seen this. It's on the Washington Ozaukee Public Health Department website. This is the latest information, just a snapshot. You can go there and dig into it. And I know, Kevin, you spend a lot of time on that site, and so do I. I check it probably 3 to 4 times a day just to get a sense of what the community spread is and what the burden is. And you can see the burden's been updated in the right side there. It says burden is 1,164.6, critically high. That's a new description that they added, and the Department of Health Services pushed that out to the local health departments, critically high. And that critically high level is at 1,000. So that's 1,164 cases per 100,000. And that's for the Cedarburg School District boundaries. So that's all bodies within our boundaries. Next, I did a little math, and we've done this a couple times before, just tracking kind of similar to what the health department tracks. So you can see the burden rate in the district, and we broke it down by secondary and primary. So when you think back, we started doing this internally at the beginning of the year, but we started making it public back on October 28th. So on October 28th, the burden in the district was 694. Secondary was 550, and the primary was 871. So it gives you an idea of just how that spread in the community is impacting our system. And this, board members, again, is a dashboard that's out there. This is the public dashboard, and on the left, you can see Those orange bars are the positive cases, and on the right side are the isolations and quarantines, and you can see, certainly up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that swoop that's starting to go up. That's students on the top, and that's staff on the bottom. This is the attendance tracker. This, again, is a way for us to track COVID-related absences. So you have COVID quarantines, COVID positive, and COVID symptoms. And in the upper left-hand corner, that's the whole district. To the right, in the upper right-hand corner is the high school. The orange is Webster, and to the right is Thorson, and then the lower left is Parkview, and the lower right is West Lawn. And you can see West Lawn's attendance, fairly low in the lower right-hand corner. And that is a great example where the student body's there, but we're wrestling with the staff and filling the staff positions at West Lawn. But this is a dashboard that we track, and again, this is all COVID-related absences. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that these are just absences, all reasons in the district. So now you can see the district in the upper left-hand corner is green. We're hovering at about 20% absent rate in the district. To the right is the high school. In person, they have 818 kids. Their absence rate, I think, was probably, the percentage I want to say was around 27%. And you can see the trend there at three of the 5 schools. Again, not trending in the direction that we would like. Oops, I went the wrong way, sorry about that. So for those reasons, board members, we made the decision to pivot to remote instruction. Remote is somewhere we've been before. It was an emergency remote in the spring, and now it's a deliberate pivot to remote. And Alan's here just to share a little bit of what that looks like and what it's going to look like on Friday.
So as we wind up or get closer to the end of this presentation, we do want to celebrate our teachers and our administrators for all of their hard work as they are preparing to go remote on Friday. So this slide draws attention to that remote instruction starts on Friday and runs through December 4th. And Friday is an early release day, so parents, that same schedule will follow. So I think that's just important, and I know that's come through the presentation, but we just really applaud the efforts of our staff as they've just had to roll up their sleeves and really remain agile every single day with whatever changes come before them, and for our families. So we recognize that this is a change for parents as well, for those who have had their students in person, now going remote, so it's a change for them as well. So as a community, the school district certainly just wants to underscore our appreciation for all of the effort that's being put into place for our students. This slide here is a simple slide that just simply shows a couple of features to remote instruction that we want to draw attention to. So if you look at it, you've got details down the left and the levels across, and the schedules pretty much are remaining pretty consistent for the remote instruction. Webster Middle School has made some really thoughtful adjustments to the time periods for the classes, which open up some really excellent features for their students. But overall, it's generally speaking, the schedule will remain the same. Synchronous elements, this is always a question for people, like how much synchronous instruction. So elementary's highlighted that literacy and math will have synchronous instruction in it. If you have a class meeting as a teacher, that would be synchronous. And in the middle school and high school, you will see synchronous instruction similar to how they've been approaching it currently. And again, the last presentation we shared, teachers make determination on synchronous and asynchronous instruction based on the content that they're teaching, so that will vary, and the schedule inside of Canvas will show parents where exactly it's a live meet or not. And some of the new features, so you'll see the schedules in Canvas for elementary will have that live element posted there so parents and students can see when students need to be present. And AMP will have some synchronous components to it now. Middle school has done adjusted the number of minutes of instruction for their content areas, giving them some pause time at the start of the day and also at the end of the day. And this is, based on the research, actually really important that teachers maintain connections with students. So our middle level students in particular, similar to the high school, having time where there's actual connection with kids in the morning and then time at the end of the day to provide some group support. It could be small group instruction, it could be a Google Meet, it could be office hours, just providing that additional time for students to connect with teachers and teachers with students based on the needs of students. And at the high school, overall real stability there based on the schedule that they developed this year, which is great. So that gives you a glimpse into remote instruction for a district-wide approach. Any questions?
I've had a couple kids that are already quarantined, and I've experienced some of the remote learning already, and I'd just like to say that it's improved since last year, and you can tell there's a higher comfort level, and it's just a better experience from a parent and child perspective, so I appreciate it.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, when you think about, just think about teacher education programs across the country, not all designed to teach teachers to be in a complete virtual experience. So everyone rolling up their sleeves and learning as we are going. So again, we just applaud all the efforts. And parents, I'm sure, are seeing the changes and adjustments that teachers make. It's just part of their craft, refining things that this worked, this didn't work, do this different the next time. And so, yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks, Alan.
Yep, thank you.
The next slide and the last slide in the presentation, board members, is just to show you the calendar of what we are and where we are in this pivot to remote. So we are on the 18th, which is Wednesday today. Tomorrow is a full day of school, the 19th. And then Friday is when we will pivot to remote instruction. That was designated as a early release day, and we're still following that schedule on that day. Even though we're going to be remote, we're still going to follow that early release schedule, which would allow the teachers the time at the end of the day, or for about a third of the day, to plan, collaborate, and to get their feet underneath themselves, because we have made a pivot pretty quickly from in-person to remote. And then you can see we go remote instruction on the 23rd and 24th of November. Then you have the Thanksgiving break. We come back on the 30th into remote instruction, and we continue on remote instruction through Friday, December 4th. Right now, we had determined that our return date would be December 7th, resume in-person instruction. And then just shared with you the rest of the calendar. We would have in-person instruction the 7th through the 22nd, and then we have the holiday break, and then we would return to in-person instruction on January 4th is when school would resume after the holiday break. There have been a couple questions, and you've heard them this evening. Does it make sense, Sam, you raised that, to come back on the 7th? The decision point and the data that we're collecting, we will inform the public and see if we are in a good place on December 2nd is when we would confirm the return. I'm optimistic that if everybody does what they need to do, we should be able to come back on the 7th. If they don't, and everybody doesn't take it seriously and do what needs to be done, our numbers will probably not look that good on the 2nd. As I said earlier in the presentation, there are no numbers that are trending in the right direction right now. There's not a single number that I can point to that says this is a good number. They're all trending in the wrong direction. Any questions about the calendar?
I've got a question, and just, I guess, a point of clarification, and not so much for us as board members, because you've done a really good job in explaining this to us, but maybe I know there are concerned members of the public that are wondering about teachers who have kids in the district whose kids will now be going virtual for this period of time. And I think there's a lot of people under the impression that the teachers are all expected to work from here. Could you speak to those teachers in those situations for just a second?
Sure, it's a good question, Sam. So the expectation is that the teachers would report here and provide instruction from their classrooms to their students who are at home. If there are circumstances where the teachers are unable to do that due to one of the areas or criteria that's listed in the FFCRA, which is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, then we would go through that process and allow them to, we're not asking them to apply for that. We're just using that criteria as our decision point to allow teachers that need to teach from home. And we would prefer to have our teachers working with our kids. Nobody wants to have a substitute teaching virtually to their, and I can see parents saying, why do I have a sub for my kid? I would prefer to have their regular teacher. And so using that criteria to guide us in our decision-making for those who need to work from home is what we've landed on. And so the principals have communicated that to their staffs, and they're working through that process.
Okay, and then just on the, I'm looking at the government website right now, and that would be the 5th qualifying reason for leave, in that the employee is caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed for reasons related to COVID-19, which this would fall under.
That would be the reason that would most likely be used in this situation. Yep,
Okay, thank you.
yep, absolutely.
So we'll be definitely supporting our teachers in that, in those cases where, you know, they obviously won't have childcare, their kids
Correct.
home, they need to sort of assist. Okay,
Yep.
good.
And we have worked, and I should say Ben, Ben's here. Ben has worked with the Y, and we are providing on-site daycare. So the Y has been very generous to be able to offer that on-site, and our staff can use that if in fact they do want to come in. Even if they qualify for this and they do want to come in and want
Yeah.
to get their child into daycare for a couple days, they can do that. And the Y is offering it at a discount, which is even awesome.
Okay, so there's still a cost to it, but
There is still a
a
cost.
discount, okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I think just when I look at the environment that I'm working in, I have a lot of directors and VPs and kids in the background, so I know our staff can do it. It's not ideal, but at least giving them that flexibility to kind of balance work-life,
Yeah.
especially under everything else, so that's good.
Yeah, it's a challenging environment, and our goal is not to add more stress or anxiety.
Yeah.
Our goal is really to focus on instruction and have our teachers focus on instruction. I think the options that we provided will allow our teachers to do that.
Yeah, and I think just one more call out is just, you know, obviously we want to provide the option of in-person instruction, like that's been our goal, to stay safe, stay open. So just to kind of reiterate what's been said and what was said in the message, just we need the reboot, and I just hope that it reverberates right into the community, that, you know, we're not a single cell entity here, that everything that's happening in and out of the community is coming back into the school and back out again. So we want to stay open, but it really is going to take more than just the staff, right? More than just administrators, more than just, you know, the people that are in the district. Because everyone's going to want to see the kids back in. We have a little reboot, couple weeks before break again, a little reboot with the break. So, I mean, I think really we need to make sure that when we come back in January, that we are consistent in efforts across the board and across the community so that we can hopefully not have to keep pivoting and keep bouncing back and forth. Not only for staff, but for students, right? That's super stressful. We saw it last year. I remember the speech you gave about the 2020 graduating class, the year of the pivot. This is hopefully not the year of 20 pivots, right? So if we need to make a pivot here, we need to reboot. I think the idea here is reboot, but we don't have to keep rebooting.
Yeah.
So, for what it's worth.
I think the reality is the cases have been going up. We saw the bump after Halloween, and we're still feeling that.
Yeah.
At some of the levels, we knew there were parties in the community, and those parties were spreader events, if you will. And we're coming up on Thanksgiving, and we're probably going to see that same type of thing. So I think the pause that we have put in place, I think, makes good sense. And some have asked, will we do something similar after the December break? And I think it's too premature to say that, but that is something that as a school district, we would have to just keep our eye on and monitor the data and let the data tell the story.
Yep.
So board members, that is the conclusion of superintendent notes. All this information is available on our website, and there's even additional information to the public, for the public, if they want to go to our website.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you, everyone.
Just want to thank everyone for all their efforts and make clear to the public that we intend to come back on December 7th, but if things trend in a direction that is not suitable to a good learning environment for our kids, we'll have an emergency meeting and we'll talk about it and we'll do whatever we need to do to keep that going. I just wanted to thank parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, substitutes, principals, custodians, buildings and grounds, food service administration, Y-Care, bus companies. This is a big team effort. But most of all, I want to thank the kids. They're going through a lot, and they're being very flexible, and they're doing a great job. So, but thank you, everyone, for your continued efforts. All right. Yeah, I was just going to announce that. Yeah. So I'm going to read a disclaimer right now, and then we can have the public comment portion. In the past, the State Attorney General issued guidance on how governmental bodies, such as school boards, should conduct the public comment portions of their meetings. This guidance was given to assist governmental bodies in avoiding violations of the state's open meetings laws. The essence of this guidance is that unless the topic being brought to the board by the public is listed on the meeting's agenda, no significant discussion can be held on that item. Instead, the topic may be listed on an item on a future meeting agenda, whereby a discussion could then be held. The reason for this guidance is not to limit open discussion, but rather to ensure that all interested parties have equal opportunity to participate in the discussion with the full school board. We on the school board encourage community input, and we want to hear from you, our constituents. However, we also take the state's open meeting laws seriously and will follow guidance as outlined by the State Attorney General. Therefore, if an item is listed on tonight's agenda, open dialogue may occur between the individual from the public and the board members. If it is not listed, the board will be limited to listening only and will not be able to respond to comments or questions. If your item is not listed on tonight's agenda and you want to have a discussion regarding the topic, you're encouraged to contact the district superintendent and request that your item be listed on a future meeting agenda. As always, you're also encouraged to discuss any issue with individual board members on a one-on-one basis outside the meeting setting. Please make your comments to the board and not to any individuals in the audience. As per school policy 167.3, each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this is a public meeting and we ask everyone to address one another with the courtesy and respect you would like to receive in return when you approach the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record. As a reminder, the meeting is being live streamed via the district's YouTube channel and will be posted on the district's website. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Susan Hartman, West 67, North 850 Evergreen Boulevard. And my conversation, and again, if I heard what you were saying, Chris, but if this topic was not presented, although it was quick and discussed about the retirement of the Pollocks. And I know many people in the district would like to know a little bit more about how that has transitioned, having 2 AP teachers retire on the 31st. And to my understanding, they too wanted to go remote because they have a child that has some compromised situations. And I am just curious because having an AP child, my daughter's in AP Psych, or excuse me, AP Chem. She's in Organic Chem. And, you know, they've been playing scavenger hunts. They've been having homeroom, study halls. And my daughter is on a path of going towards veterinary school, and she's a junior in a stressful junior year, of course. And I guess my question to you about Todd is, I called the other day to ask to have a little bit more clarification because my daughter and for other kids in the district, and your assistant got back to me the next day, which was fabulous, but said that you had no idea about the Pollocks even leaving. And that was one flag for me. I thought, how can the superintendent not know of what's going on with his staff? Because that's your job, I feel, and being a former educator myself. And then my second question is, so my question is, how could we have let two amazing teachers go, and now piggyback later, we're having another staff come in where our kids are being taught by an outside source. So I guess if you could, share a little bit more insight, Todd, that would be great.
It's not an agenda item, I don't know if you want us to, I can certainly reach out to you and give you and I'd have to get a little bit more detail on what's being done. I have an idea of how we fill the position at this point, but I would want to consult with Adam and get a few more details and reach out to you and give you an explanation. It's a personnel item. We're not going to talk about why someone exited the district. What we can talk about is services and what kind of services your kids are being provided now. And I can do that by giving you a call and talking about it. If that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a personnel item, and, I wouldn't myself feel comfortable sharing something that I might know that, the Pollocks might not want me to say. I'm not in that position, but I know there's probably people in this room that are. So in fairness to them and in their privacy and their wishes, I think it's best that, a discussion happens offline in that regard.
So I can contact you, Susan.
Hello, my name's David Hartman, same address. And I'm interested in the Pollock situation as well. But my wife has been pretty forthright as far as our concerns and questions, so I'll move on. Additionally, and somewhat related, last spring, we shut down for 2 months. And I'm just wondering, as far as coming back on December 7th, with the nature of the virus and how it has exploded exponentially, when we shut down for 2 months last spring, I don't think it's reasonable to expect a 2-week window for everything to go back to normal. You may get some of your teachers back, you may get some of your students back, but it's just setting yourself up for failure again. How many times are we going to underestimate this virus before we decide that the only thing we can do is shut it down and go virtual? Additionally, last spring, I was a teacher for 35 years in the Sussex-Hamilton district. And we did this all on the fly for the last 2 months of the school year last spring. Whereas now, our virtual capacity and capabilities are much more adept than they were back then. So I would say that we shouldn't have the same fears that we had. We won't have the same problems that we had last spring, because in the interest of pivotability, we have made adjustments. And your staff is a high-quality staff, and I'm sure they have as well. And lastly, I'm pretty sure that the Pollocks would be part of that pivotability if you would reconsider their retirements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I believe, Jennifer, you communicated that you wanted to speak.
My name is Jennifer Meldman. I'm going to move this down slightly. I live at 300 Bobolink Avenue, Grafton, zip code 53024. Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Bugnacki. Thank you for your service to the district during this challenging time. Tonight, I would like to begin by speaking on behalf of the teachers. I believe that there are 4 groups of people whose input matters when making decisions about how to proceed during the pandemic. First, the community, which includes parents and students. Second, the district administrators. Third, the board. And finally, the teachers. Throughout this entire process, I feel that the voices of the teachers have been underrepresented. Teachers deserve a voice. They are the heartbeat of our district. Without them, the quality of our educational program cannot be sustained. It does not matter what our building looks like or how fancy our technology is. If we don't have quality teachers, a quality educational program cannot be sustained. As our most valued resource, I am urging the board and district to anonymously, and that is very important, to anonymously survey all of the staff. We recently lost 2 outstanding high school science teachers whose experience and dedication will be impossible to match. We cannot afford more losses. We need to think long-term about our district. Teachers' voices matter. Please give the teachers a voice and share it with the public. It is only when all voices are heard that we can work together as a community through this pandemic to protect our schools and the integrity of Cedarburg. Secondly, I would like to urge you, the board, to carefully determine if December 7th is a safe date to return to in-person learning. As we are all aware, Thanksgiving is a week away, and then winter break, Christmas, and New Year's. People will likely be gathering and potentially traveling. While we hope that people will exercise caution, we cannot control what people do outside the walls of our school buildings. Pandemic fatigue is real. The fact that we have received mixed messages from our leaders about how to be safe is a current reality. Since Halloween, our community's burden rate has doubled. We currently have approximately 300 students quarantined. We need to exercise extreme caution when determining if we can return to in-person learning on the 7th. If we return too soon, we will give COVID more strength and extend a full return to in-person learning even further back, not much less risk losing more staff. Please weigh your decisions carefully. The health of our community depends on it. And I agree with the previous speaker. This is not going away. We cannot continue to pivot. We need to make a decision and stand by it until we have a control over COVID, which does not seem to be coming anytime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? Anyone else? All right, thank you. Moving on to recommendations, Mr. Bugnacki.
Thank you. We have 2 recommendations this evening. The first will be presented by Alan.
There is a recommendation to the board this evening for approving gap travel to Germany next summer. So as the board knows, all foreign travel has to be pre-approved a year in advance, and we have trips to Costa Rica and South Africa, both postponed. Both would have occurred next summer. Both travel companies are not comfortable with moving forward with any kind of travel plans. The GAP program, as you know, is unique. It's a 2-year partnership with our families and the school in Germany. And the families that currently have students who would like to travel are committed to and do understand that the trip may be canceled due to just international travel restrictions, but would like to reserve their tickets and move forward with the trip should it be allowed. So the board needs to take action on that request.
I'll move we approve the student travel to Germany, knowing that we'll have to potentially revisit it at a later date.
I'll second.
It's yours.
Who was that over there?
It's Sam's.
Sam, okay. All right, I have a motion and a second, and this is identical to the prior agreements that we had, correct?
Correct.
As far as background checks and all the safety and everything that we talked about, okay?
And Alan, I assume this had been vetted through the curriculum committee of the board.
And so, I guess, I wasn't at that committee meeting, but obviously if restrictions are lifted, who knows what COVID will be doing at that time, but parents know they're gonna also take precautions, and I'm sure if there's extra measures being put in place, those will be vetted, added, and then they have to kind of go through those checks and balances as needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And everyone understands it's a complete unknown.
Yeah,
But if they don't make reservations for the flights and continue with the potential for the trip,
right,
then it just kind of closes the trip option down completely. So, and there's like a $14 per student cancellation fee. There are 21 students already, families that are committed
Yeah.
and understand that and are comfortable with that.
yeah.
I think it's an outstanding program that we put together in the partnership with the community in Germany. Is really a neat thing to see. I had the opportunity to meet a number of those students when they were here, and it was a great connection for our students to have. I fully support it.
And I will say that the Wheelo Foundation has already been in contact with Babette Lou Timmerman, setting up some travel experiences for the students. So they're already, and they understand too, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you can see the relationship getting deeper, which is really exciting.
All right. Any more discussion? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, roll call. Kennedy?
Aye.
Padberg?
Aye.
Cox?
Aye.
And Reimers and I passes. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Moving on, donations, Mr. Bignacki.
Thank you. This is the last action item for this evening. We have 4 donations. We'd ask the board to approve these through consent agenda. The first is a donation of $1,000 from Klein-Dickert Milwaukee Incorporated. This donation will be used to support the new CHS Alumni Stadium ticket booth. The next donation is in the amount of $3,000 from the Cedarburg Basketball Club. This donation will be used to support the CHS Boys Basketball Program. Next donation, amount of $3,000 from the Cedarburg Basketball Club. This donation will be used to support the CHS Girls Basketball Program. And the last donation, which is a new automotive scanner and 1 year of software updates valued at $799 from Dennis Irovic with Car Made Service. This donation will be used to support the CHS Autos Program. I'd ask that the donations totaling $7,799 be approved this evening.
So moved. Kennedy?
Second.
We have a motion by Kevin and a second by Padberg, and roll call vote. Kennedy?
Aye.
Padberg?
Aye.
Cox?
Aye.
Reimers and I passes unanimously. And moving on to buildings and grounds, committees. Sam, was there anything that you wanted to add from what was brought up earlier in the presentation?
No, Ross pretty much took care of everything. We did get a nice tour of the southeastern portion of the building, which is currently under construction. Everything looks like it's coming along wonderfully there. It's good to see.
All right. With that said, that is it for the agenda items. The original agenda said we would adjourn into executive session. However, due to one of us leaving after this discussion, we will not have a quorum, so we're not going to have the adjournment into executive session. So I will take a motion now to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Kennedy?
Second, Padberg.
Motion and second. All those in favor, roll call. Kennedy?
Aye.
Padberg?
Aye.
Cox?
Aye.
And Reimers and I, unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.